Victor Echo 4, Bravo Delta Echo Barrett here. So we're going to do work on part 3 of the mobile radio install today. It's kind of a crappy day out, and we've got severe thunderstorm warning, so we'll see how far we get before I get chased inside. The first video, when I overviewed the isolated battery, I mentioned there was a fuse block here, and I mentioned I was going to relocate it. Well, the battery isolator kind of died, and I had to replace it, so I took that opportunity to relocate the fuse block into this PVC box at the back here. So this is the main distribution bus for my reserve. So I've got main bus, 80 amps. We got 80 amp to the battery. Battery's connected on this side here, and we've got the charging circuit entering here on the fuse, and then this second fuse here fuses the main distribution block. Right now I've got air horns, fog lights. This is for my voltage meter. And then these two circuits are going to be 30 amp circuits running into the cab. I've already pulled the cable into the cab, and those are going to be for the radio and inverter circuits inside the cab of the vehicle. I didn't bother covering on video pulling the cables into the cab because I pulled them in exactly the same way as I pulled in the coax cables for the antennas in the previous video. So there's no point in covering something more than once. And then the cable just runs over here to the battery. And I got it fused here again. It's always good to have your fuse right next to the battery as close as you can to prevent shorting out. And I got these two leads here off the negative post run into the cab as well for the negative return for the two circuits in the cab. I didn't have any black wire, I just had a crap load of red number 10, so I've just taped the ends of the negatives to mark them as negative. So we've got power run into the cab, and we're ready to start connecting the power distribution so that I can hook up the radios. I got the DX959. I've got the Realistic Patrolman 2025 scanner, mostly just going to use that for monitoring repeaters. The little QIT KT8900, it's kind of like a mobile version of a Baofeng handheld. They are, it's kind of interesting. I've been messing around with it for about a week and a half now, and so far I've got good things to say about it. And then my 10 meter HTX 100, the 959 and the HTX 100 will be switched to the quarter wave antenna in the back. So the first thing that we're going to do here is I'm planning on building a console to enclose all the radios and everything. So the first thing that we're going to do is I'm going to build myself a base. So I'm going to cut a piece of plywood or something. Width will be measured to the width of the widest radio, which is the 959. And from there I'll go inside and I'll start manufacturing the fusing block and everything on the inside here. I got a couple of relays and stuff. I'll cover that in a bit once we get inside, but that'll be the base that I'm going to attach all the electrical to, and that will also be the base foundation for building the rest of the console. So the base has been cut, so we've got 8 5/8 wide, which is just wider than the biggest radio and the mount that I'm going to be building, and we've got just over 18 inches in length, which will give a fair decent base for what I'm going to use as a foundation for the console. So I've marked down, just set the inverter when I was in the truck, and marked down where I'm going to mount it. And I've got this gang of switches here with LEDs on the face, and this is what I want to use to turn on the radio bus and the inverter. Unfortunately, The contacts on these guys are only rated at 20 amps, so got a couple relays here that I will use to switch the fuse block for all the radios, switch the 30 amp circuit, and switch the 30 amp circuit into the inverter. So we'll start assembling this mess here, and then we'll haul it out to the truck and start assembling the frame for the console. I'm just using a chunk of a ground bus out of just a standard electrical load center, and that's going to be my grounding bus for the radio equipment. The inverter is going to be tied directly to its own dedicated ground return to the battery, but the ground return to the battery for the radio circuit, well, there's going to be 4 radios plus a small audio amplifier and stuff, so I'm going to need a little bit of an ability to distribute the ground, so that's what this strip is for. So I've got the components installed on the base. I got a harness built for the switches. The third switch is just going to be a spare for now. Later on, I'm thinking about running out a circuit, a 20 amp circuit, to the bed of the truck for like a weatherproof lighter socket accessory circuit. But I'm going to do that at another time. So for now, that's just going to be a spare switch. So I got the wiring harness. We've got the 2 relays mounted at the back, one for the inverter, and then the other one for the fuse block that'll connect all the radios. And I've got the grounding bus mounted. This power for the relays and the switches, I'm going to use an inline fuse off the 30 amp line coming in to the fuse block relay, and that'll supply power there. I'll put a 1 amp fuse or something in there. So I've just got the power supply, the bench power supply over here, connected to it just for a test. So
the immune plasma cost over $144 million to produce and sits ready.
So everything's working. So basically now I just have to take this out into the truck and get the terminals soldered onto the number 10 power leads, and inline terminal soldered to the one, and then they'll connect to the 2 terminals on the relays here. And the one grounding conductor will connect to the ground bus. It'll supply the grounding distribution for the radios. And then the other one I'm just going to solder directly to the inverter. So that'll be a direct return from the inverter back to the battery. So inside the radio, we've got the speaker wire disconnected. The speaker is grounded to the ground, and the chassis is grounded. So I can put my speaker connector through here. I'm going to add a speaker output because the radio doesn't have one. The connector on the back here is for programming the radio only. So the audio output IC is here. I'm going to add some thermal mass on the side to take some of the heat away. I'm not sure where the output transistor is in this radio. I don't really want to take it all apart, but it's probably underneath here somewhere. But I'm hoping that I can get some of the thermal mass, increase the thermal mass to keep the radio a little bit cooler, because it does get quite warm when it's operating. And with the casing used as the die-cast casing used as the heatsink for everything, it should help keep it cooler, so that once I have it mounted inside the console, it won't overheat. Maybe add a fan or something if I have to, but I'd like to avoid that because small computer fans and stuff like that, I don't really trust them in an automotive environment to be reliable. So there's the radio with additional thermal mass attached to it. Not ideal. Not overly pretty, but it'll be hidden once it's inside the console, and it should help to keep the radio a little bit cooler. And then at some point, possibly if I need to, I can add a fan to it somewhere. But yeah, it should help a little bit with the heat that gets generated by this radio, because this thing actually does get quite hot to the touch. So here I've constructed the frame that'll frame all the radios. It's just made out of just aluminum, 1/2 inch by 1/4-inch aluminum. And I'm going to go and bring the radios all in, and I'm going to match them up, get them set to the right depth. And I'm going to have a couple holes at the top. This will attach to the dashboard of the truck with toggle bolts, and then I'll have some braces that'll go down and then will physically attach to the base that's at the bottom there, and it'll all turn it all into one rigid piece and hopefully hold it all in place fairly nicely. So the stack of radios is taking place. Bracket main frame is going to hold the majority of it. The small scanner I'm just going to attach to the bottom of the HTX 100, mainly for the fact that the mounting holes lined up. The other ones don't quite line up as well as I'd hoped, but we'll make it work. And then the little dual band unit will sit kind of in the middle like this, with the top controls exposed from the top. And then all this open space and everything will be all closed in nice and neat when I finalize the cabinet. This is just a frame to hold everything in place. So after a lot of cutting, hammering, bending, cutting again, more hammering, more bending, measuring, cutting, the radios are all mounted on the frame and pretty much ready to install. The next step is I've got this small mixer here, little 4-channel mixer, 12-volt mixer. Removed all of the 1/4-inch jacks and everything out of it, just for space, and I'm just going to solder the connections directly to it. I've got a small audio amp that was purchased off eBay that I will use to drive my speaker that I have mounted on the roof. And I'm going to mix all the channels, all the speaker outputs of the radios into one speaker. I just use these impedance matchers. Again, I bought these off eBay. They're for mixing, for changing the impedance of your speaker outputs on your car stereos to line level, so that you can drive subwoofers or amplifiers, stuff like that. So I got a couple of these. Those will all connect to the speaker outputs on the radios and into the mixer, and the mixer will drive the audio amp will drive the speaker, and then I can control the level of each radio on the mixer through the speaker, so that I can have all the radios coming out of the one remote speaker. So the only other thing I'm going to have to do here too is, because this is just designed to run off a little wall transformer kind of deal, and I'm not sure what the tolerance of this of the active components on here to voltages, I'm going to install a 12-volt regulator in here as well, just to keep the voltages within the 12-volt range, so that when the charging system jumps up to 14 volts, it won't fry or run this thing too hard and shorten its lifespan. So now with the mixer installed and all the cables ran out into the frame here, I'm going to go and take the impedance matchers and connect them to the radios, external speaker jacks, and connect them up to the mixer and mount them with double-sided tape. And at that point, should be able to be ready to take this puppy outside and put her inside the truck. So here we have everything pretty much ready to go. I've got the inline fuse holder for the switch for the relays, and the radios with all the audio and everything connected, ready to go, power leads. So let's go see if we can't get these two piles of random nonsense into the truck, and hopefully have it operational. Here we have the base in place. I'll go ahead and remove the old mount, and I'll go find some toggle bolts, and we'll get the radios mounted into position. There's another mount here. You can see I like to make my mounts custom. So we'll get the radios in position and see if this will all line up. So first things first, got the power and ground lines spliced in, trimmed down and spliced in. So all I gotta do now is drop some fuses in the main distribution block under the hood that I showed at the beginning of the video, and we'll be live. So the next part here is to try and jam this pile of radios in here and make sure that that fits, and attach the base to the
So here
radio.
we are. Radios are installed-ish. Power leads are all hooked up. Only thing left to do now, populate the fuse block at the back and put a fuse under the hood, and they should all be ready to be powered up and connect the antennas. And then the next step will be to finish off the console with make it look aesthetically pleasing, and it will be done. So the mount is complete and anchored to the base, and also anchored to the seat mount. So it's nice and solid. The switches are still kind of dangly. The last part for the install here is to enclose the console to give it a more finished look, and the switches will be mounted on the front of the console somewhere like that. I haven't figured out exactly where and how I'm going to do it yet. I'll have to take a better look at that a little bit later on. I've got the antenna switch for the switch between the 10 and the 11 meter radio. It'll be mounted on the side of the console once it's all finished and everything and set up nicely. And the coil of coax at the back, I'm going to cut it back and re-terminate it next time I get a few minutes. So there we go. Everything's working. We've got the mixer here. Mixes the audio from all of the radios. I've got them all set up. The switch is all set up top to bottom, just as the radios are. And yeah, so that pretty much does it. And I think we'll call it a day. So the next video will mostly just be covering the aesthetic part of the console. Victor Echo 4 Bravo Delta Echo. Clear, and thanks for watching.